When I started in nutrition science, if you had told me that I would have to write an article defending the health benefits of fruit, I would have said you're crazy.
But there are debates amongst people that are studying fields within nutrition.
How do we get real information out there? There are numerous different fiber types. There's real fibers in fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and plants. And then I would say there's another category.
All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Fit Vegan Podcast. Today we have another special guest, a reoccurring guest, Brendan Kesler.
All right, welcome to the Fit Vegan Podcast. I'm your show host, Maxime Sigouin, and I'm the founder and CEO of Fit Vegan Coaching, a company that is on a mission to help 10,000 people get lean, thrive, and reduce their risk of chronic illnesses by 2033 and 1 million by 2050. I believe that having a fit, healthy body and mind is the foundation to living an incredible life, and this is what the show will give you if you choose to listen and implement. Enjoy the episode and have a great day.
Brendan, how you doing today, brother?
Fantastic. Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here with you, especially in person.
Yeah, you're the first person I've recorded with that's in the program.
Oh, awesome. Okay.
Yeah. Ivy's the only one that's been in here to record.
Sure. Well, it's an absolute honor. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, and for the people listening, Brendan was in the program. We recorded a Fit Vegan Success Story episode together, which Gabriel can kind of link on the screen somewhere here.
Sure.
But today we're going to be talking about, because you're a nutrition scientist.
Yep.
And so I want to talk about the work that you're doing because it's very much tied into what we teach in the program.
Sure.
And you actually have a in-depth insight into some of the components that we talk about in the program. So
sure.
Do you mind giving a little background for the people listening as to, who you are, fields of study and all that?
Yeah, of course. Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm Brendan. I'm a nutrition scientist. And I think, so maybe I'll kind of walk you through kind of how I got there kind of briefly, and you can always kind of shorten it along the way if needed. But yeah, so I started actually in the field of exercise science.
Yeah.
And then, and you and I have talked a little bit about kind of that, coming from the bro science side and kind of many of those learnings.
Chicken, rice, broccoli.
Exactly. A lot of chicken, rice, broccoli. So coming out of those, I started to do kind of electives in nutrition right before I graduated. And really, as soon as I studied nutrition formally, I knew like that was what I was kind of meant to do.
Yeah.
So I always had this goal of going back and studying nutrition science, becoming a nutrition scientist. And so everyone's life and kind of academic paths are kind of a little bit different. So for me, I actually went and worked in leadership of nutrition companies for probably about a decade. And then in my mid-30s, went back to graduate school, specifically for nutrition science. And so go ahead.
What's nutrition studies for company? Like you would help with like the nutrition for the employees?
Yeah, well, so I actually worked for example, for a wellness brand called Garden of Life for a while.
Yeah.
But at that point, I wasn't so much on like the research side as I was more like general like leadership. So okay. More like was working for nutrition companies, but more in operations and quality, regulatory, kind of different roles. But during that time, I always wanted to get back into the nutrition science side. So that's what probably took me a decade between undergrad and then going back kind of later in life. So I was in my mid-30s and was working for a company that sold. And long story short, I saw that as my window to kind of take an exit and go back and kind of reorganize around the things that I really wanted to do. So not the easiest time, probably to go back to school in your mid-30s, but went back to school, had to go all the way back to undergrad.
Okay.
And do about a year of biochemistry work, then qualified for a master's program, did a master of science in nutrition science. Most of that research was really focused on fruit and vegetable consumption. So nutritional epidemiology and kind of what people eat, what they should eat, the dietary guidelines, as well as kind of the general nutrition kind of science, things that you learn along the way. And then at that point, I qualified for a PhD program. And so that was a real privilege. Got into a school I had always wanted to be a part of, one of the oldest English-speaking nutrition programs in the world in Northeast Scotland. Was an institute there called the Rowett Institute. So I've been there for the past year and a half as a postgraduate researcher and nutrition scientist. Will eventually earn my PhD. So it's a pretty long road.
Yeah.
And we'll dig more into that research. But that's where I am today. Today, my research really focuses still on what people should eat, but really kind of going one step beyond just fruits and vegetables and really focused on food sources of dietary fiber and some of the unique things that nature does when it creates fiber and the relationship with antioxidants, and all of the amazing health benefits that come along with that nature-made package of dietary fiber.
Isn't it one of those things that once you dive into a world, into a component of it, like 10 doors open and then you open one and then 10
Absolutely.
more open, and there's just, it's just a never ending quest of, oh, I discovered this new thing. And then that opens up like, hey, people have spent a lifetime studying this particular thing that is four doors down. So what was the reason why you wanted to go more towards fruits and vegetables originally? Because understandably, nutrition is a very wide topic.
Yep.
So why that angle specifically?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And you're absolutely right. I mean, you could do a PhD in just water. I mean, you could literally,
I know some people that have.
You could literally dig into any subject and just go deep. I think for me, kind of my brain was always wired that way, where I loved asking really good questions and going deeper and deeper and deeper into one subject. But I actually struggled quite a bit having like a really wide array of knowledge. So I was always good in like one subject in school, but maybe like not the other ones. And so I think when you find that subject that you really loved, it was a real kind of just really logical for me to keep digging deeper and deeper and deeper. So, I actually started with an interest in getting more into the medical nutrition side. Okay. And then along the course of my studies, I just became very convicted that what people are physically eating and putting in their mouths is one of the greatest contributors to overall health. I've always been very, very passionate about promoting health and preventing disease. So I became really passionate about what people were physically eating. So that really led me down the path of caring about the dietary guidelines, caring about nutritional epidemiology, kind of studying what people eat and what those health outcomes are. And then I think fruits and vegetables kind of logically came after that because there is such a gap in the quantities of fruits and vegetables that we know people should eat and what they actually eat. If you look at the dietary guidelines, I mean, the numbers are staggering. I mean, it's a 90% deficiency in vegetable consumption, 80% gap in fruit consumption, and that includes a percentage of juice. So not even not necessarily whole fruit,
like a Minute Maid.
Exactly, exactly. So these are huge gaps, and I think I've always been a big fan of kind of the underdog, and so I just became very passionate about raising awareness of how great fruit and vegetables are in terms of promoting health and preventing disease, and then that eventually at the PhD level kind of led me to focus even more niche into fiber, but specifically the fiber coming from fruits and vegetables.
So let's ask about the fruit and vegetables. When that interest came, was that around the time that you transitioned to veganism?
Yeah, actually, that's a really good point. And I hadn't, when I was on the podcast earlier, it's always fun kind of going through your life story with someone because you end up almost like realizing things about yourself that you didn't that you didn't always realize. So it was fun when we were on the show earlier because I mean afterwards, just kind of contemplating about some of the things that we dug into, it makes you realize some things kind of along your journey. But yeah, so I had shared on the previous podcast that we did together. It's going back almost 10 years now, but I had struggled with kind of a little bit of a health scare where I had really high cholesterol and some cardiovascular health issues. And so I've always been a researcher, and so was able to kind of go in and really start researching what dietary things influence that and what dietary influences ultimately kind of reverse or kind of help that. That led me very, very quickly towards the substantial amount of evidence that a plant-based diet could not only promote that, but actually in my case, I mean, really fairly rapidly kind of led to a really dramatic reduction in cholesterol. And then there's so many other kind of benefits along the way. So so it was really kind of that specific experience that kind of led me to become keenly interested in the power of whole foods, real fruits, vegetables, whole grains, plants, in promoting health and reversing disease. So that's to your point, I think you've
It was
kind
like
of
timed.
pinpointed that time. And it's always fun to look at kind of where you are now, and then to go back in your journey and kind of pinpoint something that you say, oh, that was that moment that ended up, kind of putting me on that path. But that's definitely a primary thing that led me there.
Yeah, because I love to identify those pivotal moments. Because if you think of someone going back to school, right, in their late 30s, I think you mentioned when you went back to school.
Yep.
So mid 30s, going back to school, spending that amount of time and resources.
Just had a baby.
It
was not the most opportune time to go back to school.
Well, it never is, to be honest, right? We both know this. It never is. But just to think that someone would spend that much time and resources and mental energy towards studying a specific thing, there has to be a strong reason why, or else you would not have dove in that deep into it. And so at one point in that field of study, in those years that you've been studying, did it click of like, oh, this is what I'm going to do like for the rest of my life? Like, I'm passionate about this.
Yeah. Well, I think I knew I wanted that. I mean, ever since I was a child, I mean, my passion was really promoting health, was really trying to help people live the healthiest lives possible. For me, that started with wanting to get people moving and exercising. And that was why I studied exercise science to begin with. Then I became much more passionate about the nutrition side, still super passionate about exercise and about, physical movement, but became a little bit more passionate about nutrition later in life. I think when I was exposed to nutrition science, I knew that was what I wanted to do. Yeah. One thing I loved about it was the fact that it involved everyone, that everyone was kind of invited to that conversation because everyone eats, everyone has strong opinions about food. And so everyone is really a part of that kind of global nutrition conversation. So I think that was a part of what kind of got me into it. Also just being convinced by the amount of evidence that nutrition is probably the most modifiable factor or lifestyle choice that people make that can really control such a big part of their health. So I think that's really what kind of led me down that path.
Yeah, because when you think of it, not everyone's going to exercise.
Sure. Yep.
In terms of stress management, certain things can be out of your control.
Yep.
But nutrition, 100% of the time, you 100% get to choose what you put in your mouth.
Exactly.
And so, yeah.
The one other thing I'll say too is the nutrition industry, especially maybe not the nutrition industry, but the academic community around nutrition is incredible. And that is definitely something that surprised me a little bit and really, kind of got me kind of sucked into the field a lot faster, because I think when you kind of change careers a little bit, I'm in my mid 30s, didn't take the usual path. I expected a little bit more resistance from the academic community.
Like you have to earn your stripes, basically.
Exactly. Or like, you're 10 years older than most students. Haven't done this, haven't done that. I found the academic nutrition community to be the most welcoming, encouraging, and that really led to kind of a fast track and kind of a confirmation of this is what I want to do. And that's been really awesome.
Are there debates amongst some of your peers, because you are vegan, you are plant-based?
Yep.
So how does that conversation go with some of them? Are they open-minded? Are they closed-minded? I wonder how that conversation goes amongst people that are studying different fields within nutrition.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, and I think people are kind of surprised by my answer sometimes. But honestly, there's not real, in my opinion, and the circles that I'm exposed to, I actually don't think there's that much debate amongst kind of the academic communities that I'm a part of. Certainly probably some people still consume animal protein. Some people probably still consume dairy or other things, but I think we kind of evolved over the past decade from, or maybe even 20 years of kind of as a nutrition academic community saying, maybe a plant-based diet, if it was really methodically planned, could be healthy.
Yeah.
Then you kind of fast forward a few years and you say, actually the science is coming in and this is actually very, very healthy. And then it even goes further to say, now many universities will say it is probably the most healthy diet. So I actually don't find a lot of debate around the health and health benefits of a well-planned plant-based diets in the academic communities. In fact, the university I'm at, we were just part of a really big grant from the UK government. I think it was across Oxford University, Aberdeen, University of Aberdeen, where I'm at, and maybe Glasgow University was the other one, but received a really significant government grant in order to keep funding research on how to make plant-based diets actually sustainable for the UK population. So I think most of the debate is that you see is unfortunately, a lot of social media and kind of other thing, and a little bit more coming out of maybe other fields, a little bit more of like the exercise science community might debate that a lot. But I don't experience a lot of debate around that in the real nutrition academic communities.
Yeah, there was an intention to my question.
Sure.
Which was for people to realize that the people that spend all of their time studying this field are, and I was making a wild guess, but I'm happy you confirmed it, are in agreement that a plant-based lifestyle is better for you.
Yes.
But then it's only when you dive into like the world of social media, Instagram and TikTok and YouTube, and you get people from different professions stepping in and being like, no, the carnivore diet is better for you. No, the keto diet is better for you.
Sure.
And just for people to be careful of who they listen to, like the people that spend their time studying this are in agreement.
Yeah.
And the people that are coming from different fields that haven't studied this, that don't spend all their time studying this, are the ones in disagreement. Yeah. Right. So like I wouldn't listen to a mechanic on how to fix my teeth and vice versa. So just for people to know where to get the information from.
Yeah. And I think that's a really well said point. I mean, you do have to be very cautious who you listen to. And one of the points I always make is, if I got on social media, for example,
which you should, he's a great chef. He definitely should.
Thank you. But if I got on social media and just started, posting these things that just told the truth about nutrition science and just said, you should eat more fruits and vegetables, you should consume more dietary fiber. I personally, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't know that would get the kind of interest in social media, because really what seems to do so well are the more controversial people,
dividing
that are saying things highly, that are saying things that maybe people want to hear. The people that are on there saying, I remember when Time Magazine had, bacon is back, or like butter is, so these kind of things that people maybe want to hear, and they point to that, they're controversial, they're different from other kind of, maybe government guidelines that we've received. So, I always wonder if you just got on social media and just said, I'm just going to really talk about true nutrition science, whether anyone would actually, actually follow and listen. But that is really part of my goal, is to make it interesting enough. And you are a testimony of someone who's doing it and doing it very, very well.
I appreciate that. But yeah, I've tried to play the game of being controversial a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. I didn't like it. I got death threats. I got because there's a guy eating a raw turkey or raw meat in an ice cream cone. Like basically the people are eating raw meat. There was a whole movement at one point. So I started making a reaction video to those.
Yeah.
And one of them reshared it to his 300,000 plus followers of hardcore raw meat eaters. Oh, the level of hate that I got. I call my Tony Robbins course man, I kind of want to delete my Instagram. This is aggressive.
Wow.
Those people,
scary.
Yeah, it wasn't enjoyable. And after that, I was like, you know what? I don't want to play that game. I don't want to be that guy.
Sure.
If they want to eat testicles, they can eat testicles if they want to. I'm just not going to do it. I'm just going to do my thing. But you definitely get less traction than if you are to say those controversial things.
Yes. Controversy definitely garners a lot of attention. And so I think that's honestly a hard part about nutrition science right now, is how many people are out there talking about controversial things that are not really evidence-based. So, and that's honestly always a really big topic in the academic communities that I'm a part of, is how do we get real information out there? So it is people like you that are making an enormous difference in that, but there's always that need to, how do we get real evidence-based information in a way that's kind of attractive and exciting to people, and in a way that really also helps them kind of build a lifelong ability to kind of discern proper nutrition information.
Yeah, I think that's what we're trying to do on our side. If we get more transformations like yours and from all of our other members, people see them, and eventually it kind of grows. But it definitely is less fast than if you are to be controversial, and which, to be honest, when I was controversial, the people we were attracted were not willing to do the work. And so even if you are to be just for numbers, it doesn't translate on the back end. So stepping away from controversy, talked about fiber.
Yep.
All right. So fiber is it was a big topic. It still is, but it was bigger at the time. Like Dr. B kind of came out with his book and it became popular.
Yep.
And everyone was
He's
talking.
done amazing things for fiber.
Yeah, for the fiber community.
For the fiber community, yeah. I was going to say the fiber community, then I realized that it's probably small enough. I don't even know if there is actually a fiber community, but no, Dr. B is, it's funny when I don't know him personally, but when I listen to his podcast and things, I'm always like, I love this guy.
Yeah,
this
cool,
guy
right?
is he, for one, he really knows his stuff. And I always appreciate Dr. B too, because he has both kind of the research side and the clinical side, because I'm more on like the academic research side. It's fun to hear Dr. B speak because he does have that clinical experience as well. So have so much respect for him, love the information that he puts out there, and love his evidence-based approach to nutrition.
Yeah, he honestly super down to earth guy. We had him on the show maybe 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And he came to lead a masterclass for our members for a group call as well on fiber for a full hour.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, that was great. So let's talk about fiber.
Yep.
There's more than one type of
Sure.
fiber. That's news to a lot of people. You might kind of like explaining that and laying that out.
Absolutely, yeah. So there are numerous different types of fiber. I think one of the maybe kind of ways that I try to simplify it for people a little bit, because so you can look at kind of like the chemistry of fiber. And to be honest, like that's actually kind of not where I personally focus that much, because one of the things that I try to do with nutrition science is really make it very applicable for people. So within fruits and vegetables, to your point, there are numerous different fiber types. There's pectins, there's cellulose, there's resistant starches, there's hemicellulose, there's all these different fiber types. I really kind of divide it into kind of two simple categories. I look at fibers that are made by nature, that are fully natural, made in nature. These are the real fibers in fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and plants. And then I would say there's another category, and those are purified and isolated fibers. And
I guess supplements.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Primarily in supplements. You can actually also find them fairly commonly in different food items as well, processed foods.
Yeah.
Even things that might promote fiber could use that as for example, a very cheap source of fiber. I don't know that there's necessarily a bad source of dietary fiber. I'm just very, very passionate about the way that
optimal.
Nature. Exactly. Because I think and I've done a fair amount of research on this, and we can talk more about that. But I think when you have purified and isolated fibers, although they may still and probably do have some level of health benefit, especially because the U.S. population is so deficient in dietary fiber, the optimal fiber, I believe, is really the one created by nature. So people don't even have to really worry about, for example, all the different chemical types of fiber that they're getting. Because when you eat whole foods, like when you eat an apple, for example, you're not just getting one type of fiber, but you're getting multiple types of fiber. You're getting multiple types of benefits from the various fibers that are in there. You're getting all of these antioxidants that are attached to the fiber. So that for me is kind of the really key thing for the public to understand about fiber, not so much getting into like the chemical breakdown of kind of which different fiber molecules there are, but just really understanding there's purified and isolated fibers that have been separated from the natural plants that we're a part of, or actually synthetically made in a laboratory. And then there's fiber as created by nature. Those are really where I focus my research, having kind of my core hypothesis be, I believe those are significantly more optimal for human health.
So let's talk about fiber in fruit. So like I told you before, I just finished recording a podcast with Chef AJ about her new cookbook, and it's all about desserts. And
that's awesome.
Yeah, it's just a dessert cookbook.
I can't wait to see that.
You can check it out. I have it in the
awesome.
kitchen. There's great recipes. Ivy and I are going to make one for a YouTube video. But she doesn't use like fake sugar or sugar alternatives or things like that.
Yep.
And there's a lot of debate in the nutrition community that, white processed sugar would be the same as date sugar. But I know that the fiber changes the interaction of the sugar and its absorption in the body,
Yep.
right?
Yep, that's correct.
Yeah. So do you mind kind of like laying that out for people? Because some people think that fruits is bad because there's sugar in it.
Yeah, that's actually, it's funny. One thing I've been contemplating, and you and I should talk more about this, but one thing I've been contemplating is writing a kind of a public article for a magazine or a newspaper defending fruit. And the way that I would start that article is by saying, when I started in nutrition science, if you had told me that I would have to write an article defending the health benefits of fruit, I would have said you're crazy, because everyone certainly knows how beneficial fruit is. So there is a huge misconception, and I believe it is based on sugar.
Yeah.
So I guess, and again, trying to keep it really simple, trying to break this down in very simple ways. What fiber does is so there are many benefits to fiber. One of the core benefits of dietary fiber is its ability to kind of expand in your intestinal tract. This is mainly the principle of viscosity, where it actually absorbs water.
Mm-hmm.
That's what kind of, when you have a really fiber-rich meal, it absorbs water, it swells in your intestinal tract, it makes you feel more full. It's physically pushing on your intestinal tract, hits a lot of those satiety things, which release various hormones. But when it does that, and kind of that principle where it leads to satiety, it's also actually trapping that sugar. And so those free sugar molecules that are there, long story short, it traps them and promotes their excretion. So the more fiber you combine with sugar, generally speaking, and I'm making this very simple, but the lower kind of the overall kind of impact to your blood sugar. So the less of those free sugars are capable of easily absorbing across the intestinal membrane and into your bloodstream. So maybe one of the ways to kind of break that down.
It's basically like a little sponge coming in and soaking up some of the liquids and the sugar with it and excreting it.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So if you consumed, let's say 20 grams of sugar in the form of apple juice, where 99% of the fiber is really completely gone. In that case, it's really almost absorbing very similar to other kind of sugar sweetened beverages. That sugar is really free. So that sugar is going to very, very rapidly absorb across the intestinal membrane and cause a pretty dramatic increase in blood sugar. When you have a whole apple that also, it may still have 15 or, so grams of sugar, but it also has all of this fiber in it. And then also other things, which we'll get into. That's going to delay the absorption of that. So it's going to slow the absorption of that and also promote the excretion of sugar. So it really dramatically changes. So I think when people think about sugar, they should really be focused on free sugar.
Yeah.
Sugar that is naturally attached to something else. In the case of a whole fruit, that is a very, very different, that really metabolizes very different than free sugar. So people's fear of sugar should be pointed at free sugar and not sugar that is attached in the case of a whole food.
So let me ask you this. It's a silly question, but I'm thinking, I'm trying to put myself in the shoes.
No silly questions.
I'll say it's a weird one. So I'm putting in the shoes of people that, maybe have an addiction to sugar, right? Like cookies and donuts and cakes and kind of things like that.
Sure.
That are, as for our brain, we're always looking for ways to like go around doing the thing that we know that we should be doing.
Sure.
So could I technically eat donuts and have Metamucil with it? And would it trap the sugar?
It's a good question. This is pure speculation because
it's hypothetical.
I've never done that exact test. Well, actually, I could tell you a funny story. In theory, yes, I think it would slow down the absorption of that sugar. Your best case for human health is absolutely to consume sugar in a fully attached form.
Yeah.
So not even really to let your kind of body be exposed to the types of free sugars that you would get in sodas or other things. But really, I mean, I think a really good test is like when you have a piece of fruit, for example, it should taste sweet to you.
Yeah.
You should be able to, your body should be able to recognize the natural sugar that is there. I mean, apples are really, really quite sweet. I have a 5-year-old, and it's funny, I can always tell when my son has been having too much sugar if I hand him fruit and he says, "Oh my goodness, Daddy, this is so sour."
Yeah.
And I can, pick up a blueberry and say, "Gavin, that's sweet. That should taste like a natural. That is real sweetness from nature."
Yeah.
But when their brains and bodies are exposed to all these free sugars and sodas and other things, we start to lose that recognition of natural sugar. So I think to answer your question, yes, hypothetically,
yeah,
it would slow it down.
Might be a trick to give to members that
probably
struggle with
not
binge eating.
Yes, yes.
Soak up some Metamucil after your binge meal.
So this is very anecdotal because it was just me. But one of the things, so I have a huge interest in blood sugar response and kind of testing, various fibers. Antioxidants also make a difference in sugar absorption. I don't understand the mechanism quite as well there, but so one thing interesting is, with continuous glucose monitors, you can very easily kind of test this on yourself.
Yeah.
So I have actually, worn continuous glucose monitors and done various trials on myself to say, what happens if I consume a small glass of juice with nothing else? What happens to my blood sugar? And then what happens if I take that exact same glass of juice the next day at the exact same time of day, fasted just the way I was the day before, but this time I also take around 5 grams of natural fruit fiber with it, kind of the way it would more be in case of a whole apple. Yeah. And it does, in my personal case, it does significantly blunt the absorption of those sugars. So that is a very, tangible thing that probably people can do. Again,
yeah, stick
probably
to whole
always
foods.
best to stick with whole fruits, whole vegetables, whole grains. But
yeah.
Yes, but I do think that's a strategy that, depending on the fiber, could work.
Yeah, because if you think of someone who has an issue with like sugar addiction,
sure,
then I guess it could help offset the damage a little bit while there's a handle, like while they're handling improving that addiction to sugar.
Could.
Why do you think people have addiction to white sugar and not like mangoes, dates, bananas, things that are really sweet?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I would say I'll kind of speculate and kind of hypothesize a little bit about that. That one maybe gets a little bit out of my research here, but I'll explain kind of what I think. I think when we have things that are fully natural, I believe our bodies were actually designed to kind of have those natural foods. So when you have a mango, mangoes are super, super sweet. I went to college in South Florida. We used to literally had a mango tree outside our dorm room. And if one ever fell, you would race out of your dorm room to get it because it was literally like liquid sugar. You could puncture it with a straw and just like drink the mango juice. And it was incredible. And that's a lot of sugar. But it is very different because I think I think it comes in a package of other nutrients that nature creates with it. Yeah. So, when you're consuming that mango or like dates, for example, dates are really, really high in sugar, but they do come with a natural package of fiber, antioxidants, minerals, vitamins. There are many other things in there that end up kind of altering the metabolism of those things. Not to say that there still isn't sugar there, and some people may have to be cautious with that quantity of sugar, but when we consume things that are completely isolated away from nature, so we've taken something like sugarcane and we've just, processed it and refined it down to just a straight, sugar molecule that absorbs so quickly. I think that really kind of creates kind of overload for our brain. Yeah. And that really, I think, and again, I'm speculating just a little bit here. It's out of my research area, but I think that probably leads faster to addiction, where you have this really significant brain hormonal response and very, very fast absorption. Salts, sugars, fats, the McDonald's drive-through, those type of things. I mean, we are not made to have that type of hit of fat, sugar, salt, all in kind of one shot like that. So I think that leads to a very kind of specific form of addiction.
Yeah, I think it goes to prove your point that the body is made to eat those natural foods, because if you get out of that and you start isolating some of those compounds and you throw all of them in some food like a McDonald's or Burger King or something, your brain goes berserk for it.
Yeah. Oh, and I'll say this is definitely a theory, But one theory I have too is that our bodies are very, very intelligent. So they
Yeah.
really want nutrition. And if you give the body pure sugar, for example, well, if you need energy, if you're running, an ultra marathon, that maybe does one thing. But it doesn't come with that package of nutrients. So
Yeah.
I think that there's probably a relationship between our hormones and satiety signals and things that the gut is actually calling for and saying, I need more nutrition. Because you could really go to McDonald's and you could eat far beyond your daily caloric allowance,
Very easily.
very, very quickly, maybe in one meal.
Yeah.
But you could easily maintain deficiency in the vast majority of vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, those other things. So
Yeah.
I do wonder if the body doesn't actually start to crave more foods. There's also certainly a relationship with the gut microbiome, where the foods you are eating are certainly favor certain microbes.
Yeah.
And then those microbes definitely, I think, do have a direct relationship with the type of foods that we crave. So I do think there's multiple. I mean, obesity is multifaceted, addiction is multifaceted, but these are maybe some of kind of the theories of why these things happen.
Yeah. Well, let's go back to fiber.
Sure.
'Cause I think I'll tie it all together. So you mentioned that the majority of, say, North Americans, because I'll include Canada in there, they're not so perfect, even though I'm from there. Yeah, I think what's the average? People consume 10 grams of fiber a day?
Probably a little bit more, probably around 10 to somewhere in that range for females.
15 for guys.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, we're supposed to consume roughly 13 grams per 1,000 calories. 90% of females, 97% of men in the US do not even meet that adequate intake.
So it'd be like a 26 to 39 basically grams of fiber per day, roughly 2,000 to 3,000 calories.
Yep.
So I feel like so many people have covered that it's eat more fruits and vegetables and grains, and it's pretty easy to hit.
Yeah.
A lot of our people are already whole food plant-based. They're already plant-based. So that's the minimum. No one ever talks about the upper side.
The optimum. Yeah.
So I'll have days where I'll hit 90 grams of fiber.
Yep. Same.
And I'll have days where I'll hit 60, days where I'll hit 120.
Same.
Where a lot of bathroom trips. What is what is kind of that range that people should be aiming for? Because man, on some of those 100, 120 20 gram days, I'm like,
fiber. Yeah.
I wish I didn't eat that much fiber today.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if an optimal fiber range has been established. What I would say is that there are certainly health benefits to reaching a minimum of that adequate intake level. So I think one of the things that people really need to do who might be listening to this is, I think it's good to measure what people are eating. Not everyone becomes like a lifelong, macro tracker. I personally enjoy it. It's like a puzzle to me. Not everyone's wired that way, but I think people should measure and see how much fiber am I consuming? Because again, 95% of Americans aren't even hitting that AI. So for most people, they need to start small and slowly, incrementally consume more fiber, because fiber is not something, to your point about going to the bathroom. If you average 10 grams of fiber currently, you may not want to jump to 30 overnight.
Or 100.
Or definitely not 100. So, you need to kind of formulate a plan to slowly increase those foods. Because really, I mean, our digestive enzymes, our gut bacteria, it's responsive to the foods we eat. So if you're not consuming a lot of fiber, you likely haven't been nourishing those fiber degrading the microbes for many years. And so that's really what needs to change, is slowly over time, as you increase the gut microbiome's exposure to dietary fiber, then those communities start to flourish again. They can handle more fiber. You experience less gas, less bloating, and you experience a much more healthy response to that. When I first became vegan, that was a challenge. You start to eat more and more. I told this story on the previous podcast, but I went vegan overnight.
Yeah.
So I went 100% vegan literally overnight. So I went from eating animal protein and fairly low, came from exercise science, more of the bro science, switched over to a plant-based diet. That's a really big change in fiber. And yeah, you don't, your GI tract and your bowel does not quite, doesn't respond quite as quick.
Yeah.
Now I'm at the point where, let's say that I need a very, very simple lunch. I'm pressed for time. It is nothing to me to open an entire can of beans and consume, 360 calories of organic black beans. I mix in, a few spices, and that's a really quick, high protein, high fiber meal for me. People look at me like, did you just eat an entire can of beans in one sitting? It literally has no effect on me anymore because my microbes are just, they expect that. They're used to that. I always have beans. So it's a long way of saying, I don't know that we have established an optimal range of fiber yet. I do think there's a lot of research interest in that. I personally have research interest in that as well. Next year, I'm embarking a little bit deeper into some of the blue zones data around the world and kind of looking more at the fiber intake that they would consume, especially in light that we now know that dietary fiber also contains polyphenols, a very powerful antioxidant. So starting to kind of antagonize a little bit and understand the relationship maybe between longevity, dietary fiber, and also kind of bringing in fiber-bound polyphenols. So don't think we have an optimal range yet. We know that the adequate intake should really be the bare minimum. And I think people should
work their way
slowly work your way up. But certainly, I mean, for people on a plant-based diet like me and you, I think 50 grams is probably the lowest I maybe ever hit. And there are some days, especially actually funny when I'm in California, there's so many great kind of plant-based restaurants,
which we're going to go to after.
I can't wait. It's really easy for me to hit 75, 90.
Yeah.
So that takes time, but certainly there are populations that we've looked at historically that would consume, I think, north of 100 grams of fiber a day.
Yeah.
So anyways, it's a bit of a hard question to answer because we don't have that optimal range quite yet to my knowledge, but I would say the adequate intake is the minimum, slowly increase to bowel tolerance. And I would say keep on increasing your gut microbes. I mean, you're doing so many things for your health, for your gut microbiome. So keep on increasing that to a level that you're comfortable with.
Yeah. I'm excited for you to do that research because we're talking to Dan Buettner's team for the Blue Zone.
Awesome.
Trying to get him on the show because I have to have a bunch of questions for him that I don't want to ask. But so it'd be interesting for you to study that. So I feel like if people just focus on fiber content versus eating X amount of fruits or X amount of vegetables, like if you make it a goal to hit 50 grams, like for example, 30 grams of fiber per day as you work your way up, you're naturally going to lean towards foods that are higher in fiber. So grains, beans, legumes, fruits and vegetables. There's definitely one thing that I wasn't told when I transitioned, because I just like you, I went overnight. I went from 12 eggs for breakfast and 3 chicken breasts every 2 hours for 5 meals a day. I was eating a chicken farm every day. And like rice and a little bit of broccoli with some hot sauce. To like raw vegan basically, because I didn't know that grains were vegan. I never thought about it, so I didn't know what to eat. Man, you can be constipated from having too much fiber because I was not hydrating enough. Yeah, that was a new thing for me to learn, that like once I increased my fiber that much, I thought, people have fiber, you go to the bathroom. I was like, I cannot go to the bathroom.
Interesting. Okay.
And then I had to do some research and I was like, oh, well, it dries up, right? It soaks up. So if you're not hydrating, then it's just stuck there.
Yeah. And there are different forms of fiber too. So, there's, and that gets a little bit more into kind of like the nitty gritty kind of chemical side of fiber, but there are kind of like less soluble fibers that are also less fermentable. And those fibers really like move things through your intestinal tract. There are other fibers, the more viscous ones, and those have a little bit less of that effect, where they're more swelling ones that produce satiety. So there are definitely different fiber types. And I think if people are maybe noticing that they're getting like one set of benefits from fiber, but maybe not other ones, they should definitely kind of look a bit more carefully at the foods they're eating. If you are eating a really good diversity in your plant-based diet, that will naturally kind of take care of all those things. If you're eating, and that's actually something kind of fun that I've been really focused on lately, is not kind of just hitting macros, but also really focused on nutrient density, nutrient diversity, kind of rotating nutrients. So if you have rice and broccoli, it's good, a lot of fiber there. But if you have rice, if you have rice,
extra fiber,
it's a lot of fiber. If you have rice and broccoli and kimchi and spices, and you keep adding the diversity, peppers and mushrooms, you really don't need to worry too much about the very specific fiber types. And I think after you measure your fiber for a few weeks and you adjust your diet, at that point, if that really is kind of your base, kind of normal, healthy diet, people on your program, for example, when they calculate their fiber, they should be getting a lot of fiber naturally.
Yeah, they can't finish all the food.
Sure. Yeah. And that's really stemming from, I think, that satiety benefit that's likely stemming from that fiber, and also kind of supports that hypothesis that when you eat a more nutrient dense diet, your body becomes satiated much easier. So when you're eating on the Fit Vegan plan, which even though I'm no longer in the program, I eat really the exact same way still. You are getting so many micronutrients on a daily basis. I also think that probably ends up leading to kind of a very healthy microbiome, and other kind of metabolic processes that become much more healthy. And so it becomes easier to be fuller at a much lower amount of calories.
Yeah, which is also can be an issue for certain people that are transitioning without any guidance, but without any awareness or any measurements of some sort, right? So a lot of people transition to veganism or trying to eat plant-based. Like after 5 days, I feel weak. I feel tired. But because there's so much fiber and those satiety signals are just, filled.
Sure.
They're eating, they're a 6-foot guy and they're like, I'm eating 2,000 calories a day, but they don't know they're eating 2,000 because they're so full. They feel like they're eating 3,000.
Sure. Yep. Yeah. And I definitely, everyone probably has their own kind of natural kind of amount of calories, but make them feel full. On days that I don't train, like for me, it's right on. Like I usually consume probably around 2,400 calories a day. I could eat a little bit more, but I'm fairly full. But on days where I've got a half marathon coming up this Sunday, so I'm doing really, really long distance runs. On days where I run, 10, 12 miles, my calorie demands are much higher.
Yeah.
And then I have a hard time eating all those calories because I don't want junk food.
Yeah.
So I am trying to eat, I'm trying to kind of keep those kind of that general nutrient dense plant-based diet.
Yeah.
Then you start to really hit, very high fiber numbers when you're trying to consume 3,000 calories or more per day. That becomes, so then I really struggle to kind of eat all those calories.
Oh,
Thankfully,
man.
those days are pretty rare for me when I'm doing those long runs. So normally I'm in a easier to manage range.
Those are my favorite days. Avocado toast.
Yeah.
And date stuff with peanut butter
this morning.
Nice. Where? Because you were here in LA.
I was I landed at LAX this morning, and I was on my way to Whole Foods, which is kind of my normal spot because you can't really check into a hotel for a few hours. And
Did you go to one in Venice?
this. No, I was. I usually go to the one in El Segundo, right outside of LAX. But on my way there, I saw this little tiny coffee shop. It just said organic coffee, organic tea, and so they had a parking spot. So I pulled in there real quick, and they had an amazing avocado toast this morning. So I had that matcha latte. It was a really good breakfast.
Nice.
Fasted on the way here, so I was ready for that.
Did you get LA pricing? How much was that avocado toast?
It was not cheap. I was a little surprised. I think my bill was definitely over $25 for the avocado toast and that. But, it was nice because it was very California, which I always appreciate. Like it was really good avocado, good seasoning, really good like homemade sourdough bread.
Yeah.
Then on the side, big pile of arugula. So that was really, really cool. And then a bowl of strawberries. And I was like,
Oh, nice.
with a matcha. I've been having a lot of fun, kind of looking and kind of focusing a lot on nutrient density.
Yeah.
So I've got some tools that I use when I kind of track my food that kind of also gives me some kind of understanding of like the micronutrient content, mineral content, antioxidants, other things. And so it becomes like this really interesting puzzle where I've kind of learned that I heavily focus on green vegetables, probably most people do. And tools like this are really fun because it kind of has pointed out to me like, I don't need a lot of red vegetables.
Yeah.
So it's kind of brought me back to say, oh, you know what, I need to put more, more mushrooms in this. I need to play with spices more. I need to, add peppers to this. And so been eating a lot more, peppers and tomatoes and other, and trying to really diversify away from greens are great, but also having lots of other brightly colored, fruits and vegetables. And it just becomes like this really fun puzzle, trying to eat as nutrient dense as I possibly can. And then I feel much better too.
Is it chronometer?
It is.
Okay,
yes.
okay.
Yes.
I was going to say,
yeah, I really like that tool.
You sold it, so people they'll be upset if you don't say what it is. Okay,
Yeah.
so chronometer.
Yeah, and I have no affiliation with them. I don't know anyone there. I just started using it at a recommendation of a dietitian.
Yeah.
That I've worked with, and so yes, started that, and it was interesting because I've always, of course, on the Fit Vegan program, it's kind of all planned for you, which was a huge benefit of that program. So you knew you were hitting kind of all those levels naturally. Well, one of the things I think is as you kind of graduate and go out on your own is, now how do I do this in a long-term kind of sustainable way? So yeah, I mean, that's been a really nice tool for me. And I've just found it to be fun where you're kind of, there's various things in there. And it's just funny. Like I'll get to the end of the day and I'm like, gosh, why is my antioxidant score much lower than I would have anticipated? And you kind of click on it and kind of zoom in a little bit and you see kind of the antioxidants that you might be short in a little bit. So these are kind of algorithms. So they're not perfect by any means, but it does do a really good job. It's a ballpark.
Yeah.
But it's a really good job of kind of pointing out maybe basic flaws in my own nutrition planning, which is like, hey, you really favor green vegetables. You gotta throw some red vegetables on there. And so, those have been, nutrition's this lifelong journey. And
Absolutely.
so it's just fun to find ways that are not stressful, that just tighten and kind of sharpen your approach to nutrition every little bit. So for me personally, it's been a really good tool.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that because a lot of people, they're just waiting to know everything before they start eating healthy, before they start eating plant-based.
Yeah.
And man, I'm going on a decade. I'm still learning. This is literally what you do for a living.
Yep.
And you're still learning. And there's so many different areas and angles of the field and path you can go down on.
Yeah.
And so just the simplification of it, focusing on diversity, gamifying it, I think is a big thing for a lot of people.
Yeah.
If not, it becomes boring and it feels like a task that you have to do it versus like, hey, can I get 15 different types of plants today or in this meal?
Yeah.
All right. It makes a big difference.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And people may be discouraged to hear this, but I think even doing my PhD in nutrition, you certainly learn a lot about what you're studying, and that's a real privilege. But you also learn how much you don't know.
Yeah.
So learning, I think one of the best things I ever learned maybe early in kind of the academic world was I'm not trying to learn it all. I am trying to become a lifelong learner, and I'm trying to build tools and research methodologies that I can use to learn every day for the rest of my life. And so that's really the approach I kind of take to human nutrition is I know a lot about nutrition. I've got a lot left to learn. And so I am, just like you or anyone in the Fit Vegan program, where every day I want to get a little bit better. And so finding these tools and things that you can use are just really, really fun ways to kind of keep sharpening and kind of keep getting better.
And I feel like that's the game, right?
Absolutely.
You heard of Kaizen before? Constant and never ending improvement?
Yes. Yeah. That was like, I think like a manufacturing principle that they maybe
in Japan.
used. Oh, in Japan. Okay.
And I got it from Tony Robbins like 15 plus years ago.
Okay.
He changed it now. I think he had some trademark issues because he was using the actual word.
Oh,
and
gotcha. Okay.
He invented another word for it now.
Okay.
But I feel like once you fall in love with that game of continuously improving and learning, you realize that you don't have to know everything, that you will never know everything.
Yep.
And all you can do is just continue to get better as you progress along.
I also think that, and hopefully this is an encouragement to people. I also think it gets easier.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is because, like, when I was in the Fit Vegan program, for example, I was really kind of looking to make a pretty dramatic kind of shift at that point. I needed some help with kind of macro planning. And so the Fit Vegan program was just incredible for me at kind of giving me a really kind of bringing me into a healthy place with food again and making it very sustainable. So, I think the Fit Vegan program was really kind of instrumental in doing that for me. But then it becomes this like lifelong journey of just making it fun, making it sustainable, making it stick. And so just kind of constantly trying to sharpen and kind of learn more along the way. So
that's the whole journey, is you're going to go up and down, right? Some people lose the weight and then they do a bulk, or life happens and then put on a little bit of weight. And then it's like, okay, well, I know how to get back at it. And then you lose some weight. And then for a while you're good. And then life happens, you travel, you put on a bit of weight. Okay.
Sure.
The whole goal is that you know how to get back to it.
Yep.
And that your standards change. So for a lot of people, they could have put on 50 pounds before and been like, I think I need to change my nutrition after 50 pounds.
Sure.
But once you kind of get to that level, hopefully we've changed your standard enough that you put on 5 and you're like, I need to tighten up.
Sure.
versus
Absolutely.
adding that full 50 pounds so that you don't end up in the previous position.
Yeah,
that you were in.
absolutely. And I think I lost my train of thought earlier, but what I was going to say that I think makes it easier is that I think your gut microbiome really changes.
Yeah.
And so as you change, I mean, I remember when I started the Fit Vegan program, I had was still struggling with some things along the way, but you still kind of crave, quite a bit. I mean, I think honestly, when I probably started the Fit Vegan program, I was probably craving unhealthy foods more than I was craving healthy foods. And I mean, that has been the power of the Fit Vegan program for me, is actually bringing me into a really healthy, sustainable place. But now I'm out of the program, and the vast majority of the time I crave extremely healthy, nutrient-dense foods. So then it becomes easier because you don't feel like you're necessarily fighting this battle against yourself every day, where actually kind of the go-to, the norm, the status quo, those become healthy things that you kind of know what to reach. So you end up kind of, at least in my case, you end up kind of losing a lot of that fear of food.
Yeah.
You end up knowing what works and what doesn't work. And so then you're just on this lifelong evolution and journey of becoming better and better and better and learning all along the way.
Yeah, it just changes the path.
Agreed.
Right. Hopefully you get to look back in 20 years from now and be like, that was a pivot. That was another pivotal point in my story of like when I started to eat differently and live differently. That's what I want for everyone who remembers.
Well, it certainly will be for me, and I imagine it will be for many others as well.
Yeah. I'd love to get back to the fiber conversation.
Yeah.
Right. So we talked about gut microbiome and improving your gut microbiome. Dr. B shared an example at one point that if you, for example, process food, you're basically giving a workout to the unhealthy gut microbiome. Yep. They're getting stronger because you're getting them to train, versus if you eat healthy food.
Yep.
Are you familiar with the time frame that it takes to kind of transition, weaken some of those bacteria? I don't know if they get weakened or die, but and kind of strengthen the healthy ones so that there is that shift. So that when you talk, you're not craving those unhealthy foods anymore, but you're more craving some of the healthy foods.
Yeah. I would say that it happens kind of on a continuum. So when you eat, for example, so like when I do research studies and I put fruit and vegetable based fibers into gut models, I mean, I can see a immediate change in the gut bacterial composition. You can see it, let's say, within probably 6 hours. And you see that one of the things that's kind of amazing about fruit and vegetable fibers is the length of time it takes to fully ferment those.
Yeah.
So we actually see benefits of those fully natural fibers for several days. So if you, I mean, it's kind of cool to think about. Like if you eat, kind of an isolated fiber, you get a benefit very quickly, and then that benefit is gone in probably just a couple of hours. But I mean, like an apple, for example, you're getting benefit for multiple days through that kind of slow, steady fermentation. So I think it changes on a continuum. I think every time you make a healthy choice, you are promoting the right gut microbes. You are kind of giving them the right opportunity to kind of expand and grow into grow and expand kind of the right microbiome into the right healthy abundance and diversity. But I also think it happens on a continuum where they will get stronger and stronger and stronger. That community thrives over a much longer period of time. So I think that's probably different for everyone, but I would encourage people by saying you start that immediately. You start that when you kind of
listen to this episode right now.
That's exactly. You literally, I mean, Marion Nestle used to always say, you vote with your fork.
Yeah.
And so in a very similar kind of way, you promote the gut bacteria and the gut microbiome you want every single time that you choose what you're going to eat. So you are making a difference. But it's like your paper towel analogy where you're trying to lose weight and you rip one, you may not notice it really at first, but over time, those things compound. So you're making a difference right away, and those compounded results through consistency, that is probably a little bit different for everyone. For me, I would say I notice it within a few weeks. You really start to notice some of those cravings come down a little bit, maybe a little less frequency. I would say within 9 months to a year, you should really notice a fairly dramatic shift in your overall cravings, how much energy you kind of get and kind of feel from food. So I would say, probably overall maybe 9 months to a year to really make a dramatic shift in your gut microbiome composition. But certainly it's happening at the micro level every single time you choose to eat healthy, fiber-rich plant-based foods.
And I'll just add for the people listening too, like people will hear 9 months to a year. I'm like, damn, that's a long time. I might take this on in 6 months from now when I have more free time.
Yep.
But just for people to understand that, let's just say that's 9 to 12 miles.
Sure.
It's still going to be 9 to 12 miles in 6 months from now.
Correct.
So you're still going to have to walk it.
Yep.
And I'll be honest, I feel like the longer people wait, the more they can be setting themselves back. Absolutely. So instead of being 9 to 12 miles, it might be 14 miles, 15 miles, 20 miles, depending where they're starting from.
Yep.
And they can get to a place where they cause irreversible damage.
Sure.
Where I was just talking to a client on a check-in call before he arrived. His father used to be in the program, and he was diagnosed with a specific disease. I'll keep it all private, but basically, his health drastically declined, and he's really not doing well. He has to kind of be on a wheelchair now and kind of struggling. And I've seen so many people throughout the years of coaching that they're coming to us not say too late, but very late.
Sure.
Right. We had, I don't know if you're in the program at that time, but we've only lost one member in 4.5 years, and it hit me like a ton of brick. It was someone that's why I was excited to work with you, because you travel a ton.
Yeah.
How many weeks out of the year?
Roughly 40 weeks a year I travel.
Okay. So just for people, that's a ton of weeks. That's a ton of travel.
It's a lot of weeks.
So he traveled a lot for work as well and spoke on stage. A very similar situation to you.
Yep.
Had a heart attack and passed away. He was 51 or 52 within 2 months of starting the program. Yeah. He just came in a little bit too late.
Sure.
And so that's why when we're working with people, it's hey, just now.
Yep.
Don't wait till you're on the verge, because it's so much more effort to get back to a normal level of baseline to start to see improvement.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's why I was happy when Ivy mentioned that you're going to start the program, and I heard about your store and your lifestyle.
Yeah.
I was like, good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's get him started now.
Absolutely. And and I think everyone that's probably gone through the program. So I was, let's see. So I must have been 39 or 40 when I started the program. Everyone wishes they would have done it, 10 years earlier.
Yeah.
So I hopefully that's an encouragement to people too. You always wish that you had started earlier, but it's just eating healthy is very similar to kind of, going to the gym or other ththings where you do get benefits right away. I mean, if you go and you work out, you feel better, you get, brain health benefits, you get all these other, biochemical benefits that happen. But to achieve your long-term composition goals, it's probably going to require a lot more than one workout. So the microbiome is really similar. I mean, you certainly get benefits immediately, but really to kind of overall shift that microbiome towards a kind of a healthier overall composition, that's going to take, just like exercise, those repeated daily patterns and really just repeated consistency.
Let's make it tangible. I have one last question for you.
Sure.
So obviously you have a wife, you have a son. We had the pleasure of being in your house in Cleveland for the NHA conference.
Yep.
Was it a month and a half ago?
Yeah, roughly a month ago.
Yeah. Damn, that's crazy. We had so many travels since then, and I'm sure for you too.
Same.
We don't travel as much as you do, and every time I'm back here, I'm like, oh yes, we get to relax.
Which is nice to have your own home, your own bed. You usually sleep better. You eat better. Your own kitchen.
Yeah.
So travel is very, very hard.
Yeah. But it's so, because we get to connect with awesome people.
Yes,
like
and that
you.
piece is awesome.
Yeah,
Yep.
and it's that fine line. But I want to ask, like, with everything that you're studying, everything you know about nutrition, having been in the program, the exercise, how do you navigate that with having a wife and a son? Because that's the only part that I don't have to my story.
Sure.
So I can't relate to people to that extent and give piece of advice in that angle.
Sure. Yeah.
So how do you navigate balancing everything? Because I doubt that you're going to be, it's a bad example. I'm not even going to say it because I think it's going to offend people, but be very strict and restrictive in your household of like, you can't have any snacks or anything because, I know all of these things. And your son's like, well, I'm only, eating celery sticks every day.
Yeah.
So how do you balance that?
Oh, that is such a good question. And to be honest, it's such a tough question. And I will tell you honestly how I have managed it.
Yeah.
It's not perfect. It's probably really, really, really far from perfect. I think, so I'm very, very passionate about kids nutrition. I do a lot of work with infant nutrition and kids nutrition. Kids nutrition, one thing I will say is it matters. It really, really matters. People will say, oh, it's no big deal. Like they'll make healthy decisions when they grow up. That I do not think, that is really not the right approach. Our gut microbiomes are so impressionable during those early years as we get off of either formula or human milk, start to be introduced to solid foods. I mean, these are pivotal moments, kind of what becomes the adult microbiome. So I'm really passionate about what kids eat. At the same time, when my son was born, I was probably too restrictive. I was probably just kind of overly restrictive, like, if anyone came near him with a Coca-Cola, I might tackle him.
I don't want the fumes.
Yeah, I was, I was extreme for sure. And that also doesn't work. So again, I don't know exactly what the right answer is. For me personally, I try to do maybe just a few things. One, I try to lead by example. So I try to make healthy food decisions around my son. We talked very openly, very transparently on the last podcast about my historic struggle with binge eating disorder. That was the first time I'd ever publicly talked about that. That was really,
you got a lot of support from it too.
I did. Yeah. And that was a vulnerable thing, but I want to share that with people. But the reason I bring that up is because your children see the decisions you make.
Yeah.
And this is a lot of transparency, but one time my son, when he was very young, kind of witnessed me in the middle of kind of a binge.
Yeah.
And he said to me, he was probably 3. He said, Daddy, I want to eat what you're eating.
Yeah.
And I said, well, what is that? And he named the multiple things that I was kind of, pigging out on. And that to me was one of the pivotal moments where I said, I've got to really get help for this because children see. So that's one of the things I try to do is I try to model it for him. Beyond just modeling it for him, I also try to explain it. Now, I'm a scientist. I don't always probably do the best job breaking it down. My wife gets on my case from time to time about maybe being probably a little bit too technical. But I try to explain it to him. I try to explain to my son why I choose to eat so many fruits and vegetables, how those make me healthy. So I do try to explain it. I try to start that education process for children at a very, very early age. And then I also try, I would say, to engage them in nutrition. So one thing that I have found is it's very, very hard in social situations where son goes to a birthday party, everyone's drinking sodas, and he wants one. That's difficult. And in those cases, I've had to let go a little bit more than I would personally like to. But one of the things that I've tried to do is really engage him in healthy behaviors. And I found that, at least in my situation, that really helps reinforce the right thing. So what I mean by that is he goes to the grocery store with me. I bought him a children's cookbook that is filled with healthy, fun recipes. It sits on my desk. He goes in there and say, Gavin, pick something out that you want to make with Dad tonight. And he will pick something out. Now, I've pre-screened the book. Everything in there is a pretty good, plant-based choice. But he goes in there and he says, here's a recipe for fruit pizza. And so then we make that together. He doesn't even normally eat all those things. Now we've got a big watermelon out. We're decorating it with, blueberries and, vegan Greek yogurt or other things. So all of a sudden he's trying new foods. He's getting better diversity. And if I had just made it and fed it to him, he probably would have said, I don't like that.
Yeah.
But because he was actually engaged with it, he's got his little cooking apron on with me.
Nice.
He's making it. The likelihood of him actually eating it, enjoying it, and adopting it is much, much higher in my experience. So those are some things I think for parents that I have certainly tried to do is just kind of, model it, start the education process at a very young age. Has to be in, of course, manageable, kind of bite-sized, understandable chunks, make it fun.
Full PhD lecture.
Yeah. For the next 3 hours, I'm going to talk to you about dietary fiber. Make it fun would be another one. I try not to stress about it. I've tried to let the stress go and really just kind of make it fun and enjoyable for them, and definitely engage them in those activities. So those are things that I kind of think work well with children. Lastly, and this one might be a little sneaky, but I will sneak things in occasionally too. So there are moments where he will say, "Hey, can you make me a smoothie?" I know that if he wants a blueberry smoothie, I know I can probably sneak a couple of walnuts, quarter of an avocado, couple of spinach leaves. So that may be a bit more on the sneaky side. He's not aware that all those things are there. But I do try to make him a highly diverse, kind of nutrient dense smoothie as often as I can. I make it taste really good. It's got vegan protein powder in there. So I do that as well, just to try to kind of up his dietary diversity. And the other thing about engaging kind of those behaviors, we used to go to Whole Foods a lot as just like that was our father-son night out. There were several years where that was his top choice of places to eat. And I really enjoy going to like the Whole Foods buffet with them because, he's kind of up on my shoulders and he's got 75 choices and he can just go through and pick, hey, I want you to have a fruit, I want you to have a vegetable, I want you to have, this. And so he makes those choices, and he used to eat so much better that way when he was really engaged kind of in making those decisions. So those are probably some of the things that are kind of top of my mind for engaging kids and hopefully helping them establish healthy, lifelong eating patterns.
Yeah, I think those are great tips. Honestly, I've asked a lot of parents and everyone starts with the same thing. It's not perfect, but here's what I'm doing. Yeah. I don't think there's a perfect way to do it. And I honestly don't know how I would deal with the whole birthday cake and like soda thing.
It's very hard.
I honestly have just built my community around vegan people. Yeah. So I don't.
That's a great way to do it too.
And so, when there's I don't know if I would hang out with non-vegan cake eating people.
Yep.
When I get there.
Yep. And certainly that will make it even easier.
Yeah.
If you have a community, if you are blessed.
I'm going to start my own vegan school. That way I'm guaranteed.
If you are blessed with a community of like-minded people, that
Yeah.
makes it so much easier. When we
Yeah.
lived in Florida, that was a little bit easier.
Yeah.
Our best friends primarily ate the same way we did, so that became really that became much easier. When we moved to Cleveland, it did become a little bit more difficult,
For sure.
and so that's become a bit more of a challenge.
Yeah.
And I had to find a way to manage that appropriately, where I am looking out for the best interest of my son,
Yeah.
while also not creating a lot of stress.
Yeah.
Because that's also like, I grew up in probably an overly restrictive household on foods, and then I would go to my friends' houses and just
like,
eat everything. So I also don't want to create that.
Yeah.
And that's where we're imperfect people. It's just it's an imperfect process, but doing the best we can and kind of applying the knowledge that I have into hopefully helping engage him. I will say that this week he turned to me, as one of the sweetest moments I've ever had with my son. He turned to me and said, Daddy, when I'm older, can I work with you in fruits and vegetables? And that meant a lot to me. That meant a lot to me. I said, absolutely you can.
That's amazing. Yeah. Leading by example, ultimately, I think is never proven wrong. It always works to lead by example, but it is hard. I was watching a video with Ivy yesterday, and it was parents sneaking snacks. And so there's like fruits, and like the fridge was stocked and everything, but the mom had a bag of frozen green peas in the freezer.
Sure.
But then you opened it and it was like Reese's cup inside of it. Imagine your kid catches you, or even your partner, or even just for yourself, to know that you are like hiding food.
Yeah.
Again, we both were open about our bad relationship with food. I never hid the food. I was like upfront of like, nah, I'm gonna eat all these donuts. But yeah, I just like that leading you by example for your partner, for your kids, for the people around you, I think makes a huge difference in kind of removing the stress. From, hey, you want to have whatever this vegan ice cream is, go for it. It's fine, right? It's not going to be the end of the world. Again, make it fit, or at least own it. Right. Versus kind of hiding it. Yeah.
I completely agree. I also think, kind of modeling it. I mean, I enjoy cooking a lot. So I've also tried to make plant-based eating surprising and fun and enjoyable. Coach Sarah and I used to always talk about eating with your eyes. So I would try to make like the presentation really good. And
we did a good job with that.
Oh,
we went to your house.
Thank you. I appreciate that. But yeah, I think too, that kind of helps kind of create the foods that are desirable for people too, where things are bright, they look beautiful. And so that's something, to the extent that I'm able. Of course, some days you're just busy and you're just doing stuff really quickly. But when you're able to, I think that can be helpful too, to make those foods really something that people go, ooh, I want to try that too.
Yeah. Well, talking about eating with your eyes, we're about to go.
I can't wait.
A vegan sushi spot. If you guys been listening to any of our videos, Mac and Sushi, they make vegan sushi, and they have little strips of like salmon, but it's tapioca, so it's pretty clean. But the nerve, the little muscles, and you can see everything. It's crazy. When I first got there, I was like, "Hey, I'm gonna be upset if this is not vegan." Because it does not look vegan.
Wow.
They have like a tuna. They have a tuna piece. They have like they have difference. It'd be delicious.
I can't wait. I've barely eaten today. It's always a long day traveling kind of from East Coast to West Coast. So I can't wait.
Well, let's make it happen. So I want to say, for everyone listening, thank you very much for tuning in. Brendan, man, I appreciate you driving up here.
Always a pleasure. So good to be here with you. Thank you.
Yeah, making this podcast happen in person. So for people listening, probably noticing we're doing more episodes in person. We're going to be traveling and going to some of our members' cities, and not say country because I can't leave the country yet, but states, because I'm stuck in the States. Recording in person. So be sure to stay tuned for that. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you're listening on YouTube. Leave a 5-star review on the podcast audio if you're listening, just because it helps us get bigger guests on the show. It helps us get great guests. People care about this stuff nowadays versus just having good, genuine conversation. They want to see how many listeners and reviews and all that fun stuff. So I have to play the game a little bit. So you help me when you do this, and we will see you guys in the next episode. Bye.